It's the Rob Carson Show.
We have a special guest, Derek Maltz, Sr. He is a former director of special ops of the DEA. Here he is a year ago on Dr. Phil's show.
And as the former director of the DEA special ops, you've been keeping really close eyes on this crisis since you retired in 2014, correct?
Yes, sir, Dr. Phil. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And the families around America appreciate it as well, because we need to spread the awareness. Too many people are mistaking this for an opioid addiction. This is a mass poisoning, killing our kids at record levels. And by the way, Dr. Phil, I'd like to say, it's not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. And all Americans should care about the kids that are dying.
Now, I said months and months ago, last year, maybe the year before, that this was a poisoning. This was a poisoning. You don't disguise a drug as a popular prescription med and embed the deadly poison in it unless you're planning on murdering people. That is China. China is doing this, and they're doing it through the cartels in Mexico, and they're making the death of a loved one of yours really, really cheap. Derek Maltz joins us on the Newsmax hotline. Hello and welcome to the show, sir. Glad to have you on.
Rob, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I was looking at your Twitter feed, and one of the things that I thought was pretty remarkable is the cost of one of these pills that could kill your child. How much does a fentanyl pill, a one disguised as something else, what's the going rate? Is it $20, $30? How much is it there, Derek Maltz?
Well, in America, it can go for $10, 20, 30, 40, but in the Indian reservation in Montana, it's like $140. But here's the point, Rob. It only costs less than 15 cents to make in Mexico.
Yep.
And then the wholesale is like in Los Angeles last week, they still seized 1 million pills. During the undercover operation, they were buying the fentanyl for 75 cents a pill. So do the math, and you can see how this is a multi-billion-dollar industry just from selling poisonous, deadly pills that are killing our kids at hysteric levels.
You were at the DEA, the Director of Special Operations. Make some sense of this for me, because why have we not seen PSAs? Why don't we see war on drugs? Why don't we see this is your brain on drugs? Why isn't the federal government screaming from the rooftop that 108,000 people died of drug overdoses last year? 70+% of them are people who OD'd on fentanyl, and most of those are kids. Most of those, the largest, the fastest growing number of people who are dying from overdoses are 14 and younger. Explain to me why this is happening.
Okay, several things. Number one, I testified on March 1st. Go watch the video on how I went off on Congress about the history of this evolution of the Chinese selling and embalming our country with synthetic drugs. It started over 10 years ago with K2 spice and bath salts coming from the labs in China. Then they went to fentanyl around 2012. That continued for many years. And then they transferred the business to the cartels with the chemicals down into Mexico, where they're producing these deadly drugs. But the reason is, Rob, it's real simple, because this administration is very soft on crime. They don't want to talk about China. They don't want to talk about the cartels, because this administration has created a wide-open, porous border, and the cartels are taking advantage of it. But unfortunately, the kids are dying at record levels.
I'm going to tell you, I know more families who have been impacted by the death of someone because of a fentanyl overdose than I do people who died of COVID exclusively. I don't know anybody who died of COVID exclusively. I know hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people potentially. I don't know anybody who died of COVID, but I know some families who've lost someone to a fentanyl OD. How big is this? How big is it going to get? And how do we stop this? Because our government is apparently down with China and the cartels making a bleep ton of money while China literally murders people.
Well, a lot of questions, but let me try to address this. Number one, I deal with thousands of families around America supporting all these nonprofit groups. They're working like an army of families to get messages out because the White House is asleep. Department of Education, forget about them, non-existent, and the CDC can't even produce accurate statistics. When I was testifying, I called out the White House and asked them to get an awareness campaign with the PSAs, with professional athletes, role models, celebrities, social media influencers to get to the kids. The kids are not watching mainstream media, cable news. They're not listening to podcasts. We got to get to them. But unfortunately, they're not identifying even the issue as a crisis. Meanwhile, it's going to get worse because the production labs, it's off the charts in Mexico. That's why we're seeing so many seizures at the border and in America. But really, Rob, at this point, if you had a massive leak in your house and the plumber came over, he would shut down the main valve right away. Then you deal with the leak. But guess what? We have a massive flood in America of deadly pills, and they need to be shut down in Mexico. So if we need to use the U.S. military, let's stop saying they're not terrorists. Because guess what? There's never been a terrorist organization in the history of the country killing this many kids. So it's time to shut down the production labs in Mexico.
Derek, I had mentioned this months ago. I said that we need to send in special forces. We need to paint targets. We need to drone strike. We need to serve air-to-ground missiles. We need to do whatever it takes to take out not only the manufacturing plants, but also the assets of the drug lords. And I would also venture to say corrupt government agencies, if not paint and explode, work with Mexican authorities to shut them down. Also, I would tell Mexico, no travel, no trade until you shut down the border. We give you 1 week to get this figured out. What do you think?
Well, great ideas, but here's the thing. Number one, Genaro Garcia Luna convicted in federal court this past month, working with Sinaloa cartel, taking millions of dollars in bribes, and he's not the only one. We also arrested the former Secretary of Defense, who was running the army in Mexico for getting involved with the cartels. Wow. But here's the thing. We have to understand that right now, AMLO, he just lied last week and said they don't manufacture fentanyl in Mexico. Meanwhile, he didn't even remember in February he had a press conference announcing the largest ever fentanyl lab seizure in Mexico. So here's the message to America. We can never rely on the corrupt, soft-on-crime leaders in Mexico to save American kids. We have to save them ourselves. And if it means going down there and taking the kind of action that we spoke about, what is more important than protecting our future generation? That's what I'd like to know.
It's absolutely right. And let me ask you this. Why is China in it? I mean, we know that the Mexican cartels are making money hand over fist. We know that China is sending. Tell me, why is China doing this? Are they just attempting, like they did with COVID, to injure America, to take America down? I believe that's why COVID. Go ahead.
So basically, they have an unrestricted warfare. They're going to use all tools in the toolbox to destabilize and undercut their adversary. U.S. is a big adversary. But they know America's very soft right now. They saw what happened in Afghanistan. So they're going to use the chemicals that are made in labs in China, and they're going to bomb the country. Instead of bombing us with B-52s and putting military on the ground, they're going to kill our kids. Who's going to be the future leaders in America if we're losing 100,000 a year? This has been going on a long time, and they're very smart. And by the way, Rob, one thing that no one's talking about, and I deal with this every day, the Chinese kids that are here on visas are picking up millions of dollars every week, every day from the cartels. They're laundering all the cartel money, and the Chinese businessmen are taking the cash in America, buying property, real estate, land, and that's why you've heard recently about the U.S. national security apparatus is concerned that the Chinese are buying property near our military bases. They're doing this. A lot of these transactions are in cash, because they can't export cash out of China. There's limitations, $50,000 a year or whatever it is. The point is, it's not just a drug crisis. It's certainly not just an opioid crisis. Right now, if you want to go buy xylazine, which is a horse tranquilizer that's eating people up from the inside and out, causing amputations and all kinds of stuff, that's being mixed in fentanyl all throughout the country. You could buy it online now, Chinese websites, $1 to $10 a kilogram, and then they mix it in the poisonous fentanyl, and they create the pills now in our backyard here. So it's madness. It's about the money for the Mexicans. It's about the money for the criminals in America. But the Chinese, much more nefarious reasons, and the unrestricted warfare is coming, and it's continuing. Now they're putting out etidnitazine, nitazine, isonitazine, which are much more potent than fentanyl, and that's being produced in these Chinese Wuhan-style labs. Just where the COVID came from. That's
unbelievable.
It's
Unbelievable.
part of their biological warfare, but yet America is not telling the public the truth.
I tell you, when that Chinese spy balloon flew over the country, I remember I saw it a few months ago, and my blood ran cold. It did. I stopped, and I went, oh, my God. And it made me realize, first of all, I was worried about electromagnetic pulse, which is one of the ways I think that our enemies will go after us to shut down everything. You think your cell phone will save your life, and you'll be able to communicate. It'll be worthless as Confederate currency if that sort of thing happens. But I said, this isn't the beginning of something. This is the end of something. China, by flying that balloon over, is showing the rest of the world they're winning. They're way ahead. World War III began a long time ago. What do you think about that, Derek?
100%. You're right on point. It's a different war. They're using technology. They're using actual chemicals. This is not what we're used to. That's why even our Congress, they're reluctant to call the cartels terrorists, because it doesn't fit in the 1920 definition that State Department came up with what a terrorist organization is. Well, this is a terrorist in the year 2023. We have people disappearing in Mexico because they dump them in acid. They chop off heads. They dismember bodies. It's the most ruthless, violent people in the world, and they're right at our southern border, but yet our Congress and our people don't want to call them terrorists because, hey, look, I was testifying in Congress in Ohio 4 years ago, with Sarah Carter from Fox News, and we got almost a unanimous ruling by the Congress out there to declare them terrorists. Of course, President Trump wanted to do it, but the swamp rats and the monsters in the Beltway, they convinced them not to do it because they don't understand. They didn't take the time to learn. I watched this evolving over 10 years ago. We briefed Eric Holder in 2014 on Operation Deadly Merchant to make sure he understood, as the leader of the Department of Justice, this perfect storm of death and destruction that was coming to America from China.
Let me ask you this. We're talking to Derek Maltz, former director of special operations of the DEA. Trump is the president. You're back in the DEA. What do you do on day one?
Well, for one, we have to go down there and put the ultimatum at the leaders in Mexico. We have to explain to them what's happening, why it's happening, and we need them to support us. If they're not going to support us, we have to tell them what options we're going to have left, and we have to be strong. Right now, we have soft-on-crime leaders in Mexico and corruption everywhere. We have soft-on-crime leaders north of the border and corruption everywhere, by the way. And our kids are dying. So we have to be aggressive. We can no longer sit back and think this is like somebody else's issue because the kid took an opioid pill. Right now, let me just say this, Rob.
Yes.
America is facing really tough times. The kids are depressed.
Yeah.
They have anxiety. Anxiety's on the rise. They're smoking this very potent marijuana now that's screwing up their brains. But here's the point. They're turning to pills for help. They're not even being told. So you have to have an aggressive government public, awareness campaign. Like you said before, the PSAs, the professional athletes, the role models. We have to put it on steroids. We need an Operation Warp Speed type response like we had for COVID. Why is it acceptable? I'd fire the CDC director tomorrow if she can't produce reliable stats on fentanyl deaths. Right now, we have inconsistent reporting. We have everybody doing their own thing. There's no uniform reporting. The resources are lacking. But then the families were doing rallies out there, putting up billboards, nonprofits. They're getting really tired at the government lack of response.
Yeah, we're going to have to do something. We're going to have to do something about it, and it's going to have to be very big, and it's going to have to be very destructive to those in Mexico who are perpetrating this upon us and the people in China who are doing it as well. I appreciate your time today, Derek Maltz. Where can people find you on social media?
Well, right now, Derek Maltz _senior at Twitter. I have a YouTube channel. I have all the different sites. Derek Maltz, just put my name in. You'll find me. And I'm putting out the facts. I'm not putting out BS. Good. I'm not putting out embellished information. I deal with law enforcement every day in this country, and I'm here to support not only the families, but the law enforcement that are not appreciated.
Derek, we got to run, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to be our go-to. You're going to be our man as far as the fentanyl crisis in Mexico. You're going to be our guy. Is that okay?
Of course, yes. Thank you
for
having me. I appreciate it.
I love it. DerekMaltz. Just Google it. You'll find it. Derek, have a glorious day. God bless you, my friend. This is the Rob Carson Show.
Somebody call a plumber. It's time to drain the swamp. It's the Rob Carson Show.
It is the Rob Carson Show. Definitely Derek Maltz, outstanding. D-E-R-E-K, Derek, obviously Maltz, M-A-L-T-Z. If you want to Google him and get a hold of his YouTube channel, it's fascinating. And we got to fight, guys. We got to fight for our kids.